In the spring of 1986, 24-year-old Tawny Kitaen was having dinner with a girlfriend at Dôme, one of LA's trendiest spots. Dôme was a favorite among celebrities, frequented by the likes of Sylvester Stallone, Rod Stewart, Olivia Newton-John, and more. Having already starred in Bachelor Party opposite a rising star by the name of Tom Hanks, Kitaen easily qualified for a table in the main dining area, where industry clout guaranteed entry. As Kitaen and her friend enjoyed their evening, they were approached by a tall man with a glorious mane of hair, the kind of look that could only be achieved by a skilled stylist and multiple cans of Aquanet. Kitaen was pleasantly surprised by the man's deep voice and smooth British accent. He asked very politely if she would join him at the bar for a drink. Kitaen's friend wasn't going to stand in the way, and so off she went, learning that this tall stranger's name was David and that he was a musician. When asked what she did for a living, Kitaen replied that she was a working actress, a distinction that set her apart from actresses who survived by waiting tables, but an unnecessary one. David, the man she was speaking with, had already seen her in a daytime soap called Capital. He knew exactly who she was. Before parting ways, David asked for her phone number, which Kitaen gladly scribbled onto a scrap of paper. What Kitaen didn't know at the time was that the man who had just tucked her phone number into his pocket was about to become one of the biggest rock stars in America, and that she, Tawny Kitaen, would soon become a legend in her own right.
Swing, swing.
When I first heard the name Tawny Kitaen in the 1980s, teenage me assumed it was a stage name. It seemed like it was just a little too perfect. Turns out, I was only half right. Julie Ellen Kitaen was born in San Diego on August 5, 1961, the oldest of three. At 14, she decided she was done being Julie. She adopted the name Tawny, and according to the True Hollywood story on Kitaen, the transformation was so complete that her own brother didn't recognize her at first. It was also in her teenage years that Kitaen accidentally took her first step toward MTV stardom. Still in high school, she started dating 19-year-old Robin Crosby, a guitarist in the San Diego music scene who was on his way to co-founding the band Rat. When the relationship ran its course, Kitaen left for Los Angeles to chase her dream of becoming a movie star. But Kitaen and Crosby had stayed close friends after the breakup, and that friendship is how she ended up on a couple of Rat's album covers, including the one where, in her words, "They had handfuls of mice and they were just throwing them at me." Kitaen recalled that she cringed out of frame as the rodents climbed her fishnet stockings. She also starred in the band's music video for Back for More. But Tawny Kitaen was in LA on a mission to be a movie star, not a music video girl. By 1984, she'd shot Bachelor Party and a French B-movie called The Perils of Gwendolyn. And in 1986, she landed a role on the daytime soap Capital, which happened to be watched by a British singer named David Coverdale, the same mysterious stranger she'd handed her number to at Dôme. Coverdale knew who Tawny Kitaen was when he introduced himself at the restaurant, but Kitaen had no idea who he was. She didn't know that he was the former lead singer of Deep Purple after Ian Gillan, the band's previous singer, decided to quit. Kitaen also didn't know that Coverdale's band, Whitesnake, was popular everywhere, except America. The band's blues rock formula was successful in the UK, across Europe, and even in Japan, but not in the US of A. The band's 1984 album, Slide It In, had introduced them to American rock audiences, but Whitesnake was still largely unknown in 1986. And there's one more thing about Coverdale that Kitaen did not know on the night they met. David Coverdale was millions of dollars in debt. Recording Whitesnake's self-titled 1987 album had been an expensive ordeal that ultimately resulted in Coverdale firing the entire band that recorded it. And since it was his band, Coverdale was on the hook for somewhere between $2 to $3 million that Geffen Records had advanced him to make the record. Coverdale was so broke that he resorted to singing jingles for original New York Seltzer commercials And I'll put a link in the video description because I know you want to hear it for yourself. The point is that Coverdale, despite his smooth-as-butter approach with the ladies, was financially at rock bottom. And to make matters worse, the music video that he had just shot with the replacement band that Geffen sent him was, in the director's words, a piece of shit. It was a performance video, and since the new band members had literally never seen each other before showing up to the music video set, the end result was garbage. On their own, they were all amazing musicians. Adrian Vandenberg, Vivian Campbell, Rudy Sarzo, and Tommy Aldridge would eventually find their rhythm. But on their first meeting, there was no communication, no chemistry, and Marty Callner, the music video director, wanted to reshoot it with a woman as the focal point. But that woman wasn't originally going to be Tawny Kitaen. The plan was to get model Claudia Schiffer to be in the video,
Swing, swing.
but she was too expensive. They ended up hiring someone else. And then David Coverdale arrived at the music video director's house with Tawny Kitaen on his arm. In the book, I Want My MTV, The Uncensored Story of the Music Video Revolution, this is how Tawny herself described the scene. One night, I went with David to Marty Callner's house. They were shooting Still of the Night the next day. The second I walked in, Marty went, "Fire the chick we hired, you're gonna do the video." And I said, "I don't do videos. I'm a professional actress." Suffice it to say that Tawny Kitaen did the video. 3 of them, in fact, all shot within a span of about 10 days. Geffen Records refused to give the band more money to reshoot Still of the Night, so Callner, the director, fronted $35,000 of his own money. Still of the Night, Here I Go Again, and Is This Love were all shot on a shoestring budget, and if you look closely, it's pretty obvious. But they had Tawny Kitaen, and that was all that really mattered. And of course, it was the music video for Here I Go Again that really propelled Whitesnake to superstardom. With no money for renting luxury cars, Callner and Coverdale used their own cars, which just happened to be nearly identical Jaguars. That's the director's black Jaguar on the left, and Coverdale's white Jaguar on the right. Paula Abdul, who would soon find stardom herself with Forever Your Girl, was hired to choreograph. Callner and Coverdale were apparently not aware that Kitaen had trained in both ballet and gymnastics up until the age of 15. As a gymnast, she did floor exercise and balance beam, and it showed. When Kitaen spontaneously started doing cartwheels and splits on the 2 cars, Callner's jaw dropped. Paula Abdul's response was, "There is nothing I can show her." Here I Go Again, ironically, is a song that Coverdale wrote about his first marriage falling apart. The song was originally released by the UK incarnation of Whitesnake in 1982, but the bigger, more glamorous 1987 version of the song is part of what ignited a serious romance between Kitaen and Coverdale as it rocketed to #1 on the singles charts. Whitesnake toured that year as the opener for Motley Crue on their Girls, Girls, Girls tour, which I was there for, and I have the t-shirt to prove it. And not long after that, the band launched a tour of their own where they were the headliners. And sorry for bragging, but I have that t-shirt too. And during this unforgettable era in rock history, Tawny Kitaen received an enormous amount of attention, as she was now inextricably linked to one of the world's biggest bands. USA Today declared her to be every 14-year-old's dream date. The LA Times dubbed 1987 the year of Tawny's legs. Marty Callner himself, the music video director, said that she carried the whole video for Here I Go Again, and David Coverdale also credited that video with the band's success. However, as much as Tawny Kitaen was responsible for giving the band visibility on MTV, I think it's worth mentioning one other person who was also a huge part of Whitesnake's 1987 breakout. That album would go on to sell 8 million copies by 1995, thanks in part to John Sykes, who was one of the band members Coverdale fired before the new band arrived. Sykes co-wrote most of that album with Coverdale and laid down the unbelievable guitar work behind it. And then, for reasons too complicated to explain here, he was fired before the videos were ever shot. So when you watch Still of the Night, you're seeing a band that had just met miming to songs written and played by a man who had already been shown the door. The face that sold the record belonged to Tawny Kitaen, but a huge part of the sound belonged to John Sykes. Tawny Kitaen and David Coverdale got married in 1989, but the marriage didn't survive the very thing that made those music videos work. Tawny had become Whitesnake's main attraction. Fans were showing up to concerts with signs that read, "We want Tawny," and by her own account, she had become more famous than the band. They were divorced by 1991. Kitaen and Coverdale never spoke again, but by the time she reflected on it years later, Tawny Kitaen didn't seem to have any regrets. Asked what she wanted her legacy to be, she said she'd done it all: movies, television, music videos, and what she wanted was for people to ask, what didn't she do? Tawny Kitaen passed away in 2021 at the age of 59, and even after 3 decades of silence between the two, David Coverdale remembered her as synonymous with Whitesnake, with MTV, and an iconic, amazing beauty who brought a lot of attention to his music. Not bad for a working actress who, one night at Dôme, had no idea who he was.